Hi, Gordon. Thank you for joining us today. Maybe you can just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into our questions around AI and influencer marketing.
So my name is Gordon Glenister. I am a podcast host of Influence the Global podcast. I'm also an author on influencer marketing strategy, a second edition of which came out just in July, and also the founder of the influence division of the Branded Content Marketing Association.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Jess, and I'm an account director at Dragonfly AI.
Mm.
So our first question today, AI can optimize influencer selection based on data. But what role will intuition and creativity play in choosing the right influencers in the future?
I think it's a really interesting question because I think there's been so much hype about AI and it affecting the whole creator economy. People are going to lose their jobs. Are we going to have AI influencers taking over real influencers? It's always going to be a place for creativity. I think where we're going to see a real growth in AI, as we're already seeing, of course, in some of these mundane tool tasks that we are doing on a day-to-day basis, because actually influencer selection does take quite a lot of grunt hard work. And let's be honest, if we think about AI, a lot of it's going to be about managing data at scale. So the more data that we've got access to and the better tools that we can use to mine that data will make a profound difference. But I still believe that AI should sit very firmly in the co-pilot position, and that those organizing influencer campaigns should be able to, um, you know, make sure that those decisions are finally based by those individuals and not just by the AI bots and things. So I think, yeah, it's a fascinating, and it's moving at such fast pace. I mean, there's like 200 tools coming out every couple of weeks or so, isn't there? So I think
Yes.
knowing what tools to use for what purpose, I still think is a challenge. But I mean, I've seen some great content online at the moment using CGI. We've started to see some fantastic, what I see the other week was the Nike tube train. I don't know if you saw that, did you? The underground, and they created into Nike shoes, Nike Town, I think it was called. And then, of course, the Maybelline uh, tubes as well with their
Yeah, seen those.
yeah, those sorts of
Well, I'm
stuff.
not sure it's gonna.
Yeah, so I think what we're doing is we're just adding a whole level of excitement in content creation. There's another one the other day which was like spaghetti coming out of a soup bowl and then turning into a pirouette and dancing creatively. So I think it's all about how you use them, really.
Yeah, no, I've seen those as well. I like the ones, I think it was maybe Gordon's in Times Square, and they show the Gordon's bottle making a gin and tonic and type on one of the buildings. So yeah, it's really cool.
Absolutely.
But I totally agree with you on there still needs to be that level of human touch there. Great. So, kind of thinking about that then. So, there's a growing trend of AI generated virtual influencers. Do you believe these non human influencers could ultimately replace human creators? And what might that mean for the future of authentic marketing?
I'd like to think we as the viewer have a good eye for detecting what is real and what isn't. But then there are other people that just don't care. As long as it's actually the content is entertaining, educational, and inspiring those viewers, then so what? And actually, if you take it back to historical times when we've loved Mickey Mouse, haven't we? We've loved cartoon characters. Those aren't real, are they? And yet we've got an emotional attachment to them. And I mean, people like Little Michaela, which is a well-known AI computer-generated influencer, has got millions of followers and has done very successful brand activations. So I think, but it actually says it, of course, on the bio that she's an AI generated bot. So for me, I think I don't think they're going to be replaced. I think we'll just have an alternative. Some people want to follow and enjoy the content from those people, and others will not. I always think content is king, always.
Mm.
I also believe in the principle of disclosure, so that we're properly advised about whether or not an image or an individual is real or not. Because I think people don't want to be deceived,
Mm.
you know. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. I was reading obviously about this kind of ahead of this recording today, and I saw one thing that kind of really struck me was how these AI influencers look and how this is affecting obviously who they're appealing to, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and like what is that impact when they're seeing the same type of person over and over again. So I think that's kind of an interesting angle as well. But I guess ultimately it's cost effective, it's scalable,
Mm.
that's the way of this. But then, traditional consumer trust, are they going to trust these people? And ultimately, what's that going to mean for kind of brand loyalty and customer loyalty and that sort of thing?
I think it's already happening. We can't change it. I think it's caveat emptor, as we say. Let the buyer beware and make the decisions as they are. They're not going to, as I said, they're not going to go away. I think
Yes.
it's just, for me, it's just about open disclosure and transparency. I don't think we're going to see less authenticity. I think actually people will just want to see more of it.
Mm.
Um, and they'll make the decisions based around that. When you book a destination on holiday, or you go to a restaurant, you check the reviews, don't you? And you check who's given them. And
Yeah.
it's the same principle, really. We want to connect with people that are like us. But for some people, those are artificially led individuals. I mean, look at the gaming world, for example.
Mm.
How many individuals there, they get immersed in that world of almost artificial, but what it is an escapism. So
Yeah.
we shouldn't underestimate that in some instances this creates an opportunity for people to not always be real.
Yeah, yeah. And when they've grown up in that digital world anyway, what's this extra layer,
Yeah.
really? So AI can help brands identify influencers whose values align with theirs on a more granular level. How do you think this could help foster long-term value-driven partnerships between brands and creators?
As I said before, I think it's all about data, and the better understanding that a brand has about the creator and their followers, the better. There are now platforms that will be able to identify followers' income level, their marital status, all of those types of things. And although I always think about influencers as real human beings, if we look at it more from a transactional point of view, they are a media buy. And if the brand is able to understand through using AI technology to get closer to that data and understand that it is a perfect match, in other words, their followers are absolutely aligned with the ideal target audience of that brand, then
Mm.
it's an absolute match made in heaven. And we should be celebrating that, because it means that what we'll start to see is better ROI on influencer marketing, and we'll start to see greater and increased level of investment in that area as well, which of course we all want. That's been the sort of stifle in the early years, is not being able to show ROI. But
Mm.
of course, as we start to look more at performance marketing influencer strategies, then I think it's going to foster greater relationships, because also if there's a good match, the influencer is going to find that the campaign's working well for them, and they're going to get more work. They're going to be there as an always on campaign, because it's a perfect solution for all.
Yeah, definitely. So how will the brand see that ROI then?
Well, through the different measurement criteria that they otherwise have already been looking at, whether it's different metrics that they have in place, whether or not they're looking to create greater brand awareness, whether or not it's conversions, i.e. web visitors, or whether it's more positive comments through the influencers' social feeds, comments, likes, and shares, all that sort of stuff, traditional engagement, if you will. But ultimately, a brand wants to, you know, wants to get sales at the end of the day, and drive that, and anything that's going to help them get closer down that funnel. You have to remember, influencer marketing in the early days was always about brand awareness.
Mhm.
It wasn't, we weren't able to, and I think I think it will also help the expectations within organizations, because so often what we find is marketeers that love the idea of doing influencer marketing sometimes get blocked by the internal finance team or others higher up the food chain, if you will, that believe in traditional marketing, and that influencer marketing is a bit of a fad, and why are we investing our money here? Because they can't understand that if somebody does a post or a story, that suddenly the sales aren't going to pour in. Well, that's like watching TV and expecting us all to rush out and go and buy that product afterwards. We need to make sure that there is a better understanding within organizations that, things take time to build. When you're building a brand with an awareness, that's why these always on and brand ambassador programs seem to be the most effective. What we don't want to do is have just these short-termism, because what happens is so often, well, they spent £3,000 or £4,000 on a post with that influencer. It didn't really drive the sales, so therefore influencer marketing isn't working. Well, of course, that's totally not right. It might be that they've found the wrong influencer, or they just haven't given it enough time for that product or service to be shown to the influencer's followers. It
Yeah.
just, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And the consumer themselves might not be in that right buying stage, but a few
Absolutely.
weeks down the line, they'll remember and go, "All right, yeah, I'm going to look that up again." Final question: how can AI foster long-term, value-driven partnerships between brands and influencers? I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but anything else you can kind of think of there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what a lot of influencers have been using AI tools in terms of ideation, and that creative process. I
Yeah,
think it will help with better briefing ahead of, so just really to get the ideas together, and of course that normally would take a certain amount of time anyway. So it's shortening that process and time. Um, and I think in terms of measurement, we'll get better measurement criteria. And as I've already said, I think by being able to use data, and a lot of the influencer platforms now have got AI technology now integrated, or are still working on developing that. So we're going to get even better AI, so that we'll start to see content perform better, because we'll get a better idea of test and measure at scale, which we weren't able to always do. So if, for example, this type of content worked well. Well, why did it work well? Well, because it was 30 seconds, it was at the right time of day, or whatever. All of that sort of test and measure process, which would have taken quite a lot of time, will reduce hugely, because ultimately a brand wants both brand and influencer wants content that's going to generate results. So I think that's some of the ways in which I think it's going to change.